Greetings, booktubers, and welcome back to Grammaticus Books. Welcome to a Veterans Day edition of Grammaticus Books. Once a year on Veterans Day, I allow myself to break the rules of BookTube and talk about something other than vintage science fiction and vintage fantasy, or something semi-related to that. And I tell a tale from the military days, from my past service in the military back in the mid to late 80s and early 90s. Last year, I did a story on MiG-23 fighter jet interceptions of our reconnaissance aircraft off of the east coast of the Soviet Union. And the year before that, I talked about being at U.S. Army Air Assault training and the crazy major who had a screw loose who was running that school, and the blood wings pinning ceremony that they did at the end of that at that training course. And I'll link both of those videos down below. And I have a playlist where I put these into that playlist. And so this year we're going back to Naval Aircrewman Candidate School. The year is 1987, and we're talking about the helo-dunker. We're talking about the helicopter dunking training apparatus, an apparatus designed in Hades and inflicted upon the men and women who went through Naval Aircrewman Candidate School there at the Naval Air Station in Pensacola, Florida. This is a device that was during the drown-proofing phase of training at Naval Aircrewman Candidate School, where you learned how to survive in the water. And the helo-dunker was a giant, I say giant, but it's about 15 feet long. It was a 15-foot-long steel tube that was designed to be a mock-up of the inside of a CH-46 troop carrier helicopter. And they had this steel tube, the helo-dunker, in a large indoor pool, a very large indoor pool, and it was attached to 4 cables that went up to a crane. And they would load this up. You could get about 6 people into it. You had a seat in the front for the pilot and co-pilot. Directly behind them was an entry, a main door into the helo-dunker. And then to the left of the main door, you had, I think it was like 3 rows of seats. And you'd get 4 guys in the back behind that main door. So 2 guys in the pilot, co-pilot seat, main door, turn left, and you got about 4 rows of seats for 4 guys to get in the back of it. And then the back end of this steel tube is open, and you would have a safety diver in full scuba gear at the back of the helo-dunker. And again, this thing's about 15 feet long. It's a steel tube, and they would put it on these cables. They would lift it up after you filled it up with guys, and then drop it down into the water, and it would sink. And via the cables, they could manipulate the cables in order to rotate it to the left, rotate it to the right, or turn it completely upside down. And then you had to extract yourself out of the helo-dunker and work your way up to the surface and then swim to the edge of the pool. And you had to do this 4 times in order to pass this evolution of Naval Aircrewman Training School at Naval Air Station in Pensacola. Now, the helo-dunker isn't that well known. Even outside of the Navy, it's not that well known. There's another device that's much more well known, has a much better reputation due to a Richard Gere movie called Officer and a Gentleman, and that's the Dilbert-dunker. And I'll talk about the Dilbert-dunker here in just a second. But the helo-dunker was a known and feared device in the Navy because it was an absolute nightmare going through that thing. It was one of the hardest things at Naval Aircrewman Candidate Training School. And Naval Aircrewman Candidate Training School is for the enlisted. I was enlisted. And then you had the officers training there at Pensacola, a Naval Air Station as well. The officers, their training was much more difficult, much more regimented, much more boot-like than ours was. Once we finished our training day, which was Monday through Friday, we had the evening off. We could do whatever we wanted. We had weekends off. You were in Pensacola. It's the 1980s. It was a small, quiet base with pristine beaches and everything going with Florida there in the Panhandle and Pensacola. It was a great place to be, and I loved the training. But the helo-dunker was an evolution straight out of hell. It was a nightmare, and it was rightly feared by training recruits. So the Dilbert-dunker is the one that's well known. This is the one that was popularized in the movie Officer and a Gentleman with Richard Gere. That movie, by the way, was not shot in Pensacola, though it supposedly takes place there. They would not give them authorization to film on the base in Pensacola, so they filmed the whole thing in Washington State. And that's why it has that cast-over, gloomy look to it instead of the sunshine that you expect in Pensacola, Florida. But in there, you've got the scene with the Dilbert Dunker in that movie. And the Dilbert Dunker doesn't simulate a helicopter. It simulates a fighter jet that's crashing into the sea. And it's training pilots how to get out of a crashed fighter jet sinking into the sea. And you've got a rail set at a 45-degree angle that goes up about 15 feet. And you've got that cockpit on the rail, but there's no windshield in the cockpit. It's just steel tubing, and then the front of it is open. And as a trainee, you get up there, you strap yourself into this cockpit. They release it. It goes down the rail at a pretty good clip, hits the water, splashes into the water. You enter the water, and then the rails go underneath and then rotates you upside down. And once the Dilbert Dunker stops, you have to pop out of your harness and then work your way up to the surface. And famously in the movie Officer and a Gentleman, one of the recruits can't get out of the harness, can't figure it out, and almost drowns during this episode. I'm here to tell you the Dilbert Dunker is easy as pie. There's nothing to fear with the Dilbert Dunker. I wound up doing the Dilbert Dunker later in my career. It was associated with a special operations project that I had volunteered for. I went out to Whidbey Island, and I went through the ejection seat trainer, and I went through the Dilbert Dunker. The Dilbert Dunker is on a rail. There's only one way out of it. You know where it's going. You can see it coming down the rail, and the rail doesn't move. So once it hits the water and goes underneath, you know exactly where you are. All you have to do is release your harness, which is easy to do. And even if for some reason you should get disoriented, all you do is you grab the rail and you follow the rail up to the surface. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. It's no problem. The biggest problem with the Dilbert Dunker is there's no windshield in the front of this thing. And so when it hits the surface of the water going at a pretty good clip, it shoots water straight up your nostrils like somebody stuck a garden hose in there with a handle on it and hit the spray on the handle, and it cleans out your sinuses pretty good. But other than that, it's easy peasy. The helo-dunker is not easy peasy. It was a nightmare. This was a nightmare device. This was a device that was, as I said, conceived in Hades and then inflicted upon the trainees of Naval Aircrewman Candidate School. And it was designed to teach Naval Aircrewman candidates or recruits going through Naval Aircrewman Candidate School. You have to finish to become a Naval Aircrewman candidate, a Naval Aircrewman, how to escape from a helicopter that had crashed in sea and was sinking into the sea. How do you get out of it? And unfortunately, that was something that happened with some frequency in the Navy. I was stationed over in the Pacific, and every year we had a very large operation called Team Spirit that simulated repelling a North Korean invasion of South Korea. And they would fly in tons of Marines that would fly them in on these CH-46s. And every single Team Spirit, at least one CH-46 would crash during the conducting of this training operation. So it was something you needed to know how to do. And the problem with the Dilbert Dunker is it could go down and they could rotate it left, right, or upside down, and you weren't going through this in a bathing suit. Oh no, you weren't that lucky. You weren't just wearing a bathing suit as you were sinking down to this thing. You were in full flight gear. That means you were strapped into the dunker, the helo-dunker, in a full flight suit, Nomex made flight suit from ankles all the way up to your neck, down to your wrists. You had flight gloves on your hands. You had mid-calf leather boots with steel toes on your feet, and you had a flight helmet on your head, and you had an SV2 survival vest strapped over your chest. So you were wearing quite a bit inside of this container that was sinking down several yards under the surface that you had to then get out of and work your way up to the top. And you ask, what is an SV2 survival vest? Well, I'll show you here. I'll find a picture of one and I'll put it up here. And I've got some aviation cards that they gave us at training, and I'll pull one out of here and I'll show you that as well. Hold on one second. So this is a deck of cards that they gave us at Naval Aircrewman Candidate School, aviation survival equipment in the front and the back. There's a little picture of the flight helmet that you would have had on your head in the helo-dunker. And in here's a bunch of cards. And again, there's your fleet naval aviation helmet. And here's a picture of your SV2 survival vest. So this is basically a canvas vest, canvas and nylon, that went around your midsection, and it had canvas straps that went over the shoulders, and then you would put gear into this SV2 survival vest. Now, at the school, they had taken all the gear out of it, and the two big pouches, one for the radio and one for other large piece of equipment, they had put wood blocks into there to help it be a little more buoyant, to help you out a little bit with all this gear while you were doing the drown-proofing phase of training. And I'm going to tell a little side story here. On the first day of drown-proofing, we go into this cavernous indoor pool, and they have these metal bleachers facing the pool, and they take our class in, and they have us all sit down up on the bleachers. And then on the wall to the right of us are all these SV2 survival vests hanging on pegs all down the wall. And we're sitting there waiting for what we don't know what. And the commander of the school comes in. He's in his dress whites. He walks in, he steps up in front of us, and he says, "Now I know what every one of you swinging so-and-sos, except he doesn't say so-and-so, is thinking. You've heard that those wooden blocks in those SV2 survival vests have been in there for so long and in the water for so many months and years that they're now all waterlogged and are going to drag you to the bottom. Well, I'm here to tell you that is BS," except he didn't say BS. And he goes, "and I'm going to prove it to you." And at that, he marches over to the wall. He grabs one of the SV2s off of the peg. He marches back in front of us, turns, faces the pool, and he tosses this SV2 vest out into the pool. It hits the pool. It sits there on the surface of the water for about 2 seconds, and then it goes straight to the bottom of the pool like a boat anchor and just is sitting on the bottom of the pool. The commander is sitting there. His feet are apart. He's got his fists on his hips, just staring down at it like he's mad, like it's defied his orders. And then he turns around after about 5 seconds, points at us and goes, "Well, all the rest of them float. No, go grab one and jump in the water." And then he walks out, marches out of the classroom. And they never told us, but I'm convinced it was a prank that they played on all of the classes when they came in there. And they had actually put lead weights into that SV2 vest so that it would sink to the bottom. And it was a good prank. It was a good one. But that was the SV2 survival vest. Here's a picture of a flight suit, a Nomex flight suit right there, which you were also wearing in the helo-dunker. And then here's a your naval aviation issued survival knife. This was not with you. The only reason I put this up here is because my girlfriend in Japan stabbed me with this in the middle of the night one night. That's a true story. I should tell that story sometime about getting stabbed with my own survival knife by my girlfriend. But that was the equipment you had on. You were geared up inside of this thing when it sank down in there, and you had to ride this beast down 4 times and extract yourself out of it successfully 4 different times. 4 evolutions. And the first evolution was you had your gear on, you walked up the 3 metal steps onto the platform that led to the helo-dunker, hanging there on its 4 cables. You entered in through the main door. Each of you was given a number that was correlated to an assigned seat inside of the helo-dunker. And you sat down, and they would take it out, drop it over the pool. It would start sinking down into the water. And as it's sinking, the safety diver in the back is splashing you in the face with water. And the reason that the safety diver is doing this is not to be cruel. It's to teach you not to try to game the system, not to try to get like a giant breath of air right as your head's going underwater as this thing is sinking. Because in the real world, if you try this and suddenly the helicopter lurches as you're actually sinking in the ocean and you get a lung full of water, your survival chances just now plummeted. If you stay calm, you breathe normally, you hold your breath as you're going under, and then you are going to have a better chance of survival. And by splashing you in the face, this was reinforcing that. And he did get a few people who are trying to game the system. But the device, it would sink down. This is evolution number 1. It would go down under the water. They would rotate it 1 of the 2 ways. And then everybody went out the window that was next to them. In addition to the main door, each seat had a very large window situated next to it. And on evolution 1, you would go down, ride it until the machine stopped. And at that point, you could come out of your seat, and then you grabbed the window, the frame of the window that you were next to. You pulled yourself out, saw which way it was to the surface, work your way up to the surface, swim over to the edge of the pool, and that was evolution number 1. Fairly easy, fairly simple. Everybody passed this one without too much trouble. And then you got to evolution number 2. Evolution number 2, same thing. You walk up the 3 metal steps, you get on the platform, You enter through the main door, you take your assigned seat, you ride it down, they rotate the thing as it's going down. The safety diver is splashing water in your face as this thing is sinking and rotating. But this time, instead of everybody going out their window, everybody has to go out the main door at the same time. So now you're fighting with 5 other guys trying to get out that main door with steel-toed boots, helmets. You're getting kicked in the face and the ribs. People are climbing over the top of you, trying to get to the door, and everybody has to go out that door and then make it to the surface and then swim over to the side of the pool. And things just got a little more complicated. And we had a sergeant in our class, so I'm going to call him Sergeant W, who is a Marine. We had a couple Marines in the class. I think we had 2, and the one guy dropped out, and Sergeant W was the only one with us. And Sergeant W had trouble with this evolution, wound up with a lung full of water. And they got him over to the side of the pool, and they pumped the water out of his lungs and then stood him back up. And that was evolution number 2. So then you work your way to evolution number 3. And evolution number 3 in this device, and this beast from HE double hockey sticks, as you went on, you got into the helo-dunker, just like in the first 2 evolutions, except this time you had to put on blacked out swimmer's goggles. So they handed you a pair of swimmer's goggles where the lenses had been spray painted over with black paint. And you put these on underneath your flight helmet so you couldn't see. And this was to simulate a crash into the ocean in a helicopter during the night. And this made things much more complicated and much more stressful. If you were nervous at all, if you had claustrophobia, this was going to be pretty much your worst nightmare. So on evolution number 3, you've got the blacked out goggles, you're going down, the device is sinking, the helo-dunker is sinking, it's rotating. You can't really tell how it's rotating, and you can't really know exactly where you are when your head is going to go underwater. The safety diver is still splashing water in your faces, and it goes down, sinks down about 3 or 4 feet, maybe a little farther than that, comes to a rest, and once it stopped, then it was everybody out the window next to them, closest to them. And you got to your window, you popped your seatbelt, you were strapped in, popped the seatbelt off, grabbed the window that was next to you, and you pushed your way out away from the helo-dunker, except you don't know which way is up. You don't know if you're pointed down, you don't know if you're pointed up, you don't know if you're pointed sideways, so you don't know which way is to the surface. So how do you solve this problem? Well, they taught us a very good way, the class instruction way to do it. Once you cleared out of your window and got clear of the helo-dunker, you made your body straight and rigid, and you were basically like a weighted bobber. You've got steel-toed boots on your feet, and you've got an aviation safety helmet, a naval flight helmet on your head that's made out of foam and plastic. It's lighter than the water, your head is, and your feet are heavier than the water. So you would make yourself rigid, and slowly, ever so slowly, your feet would drag you down to orientate you so that you were in an up and down position. Now, if you were running low on air by the time you got to here, this could be a torturous wait to figure out which way was up and which way was down. And if you had come completely around and we're now in that up and down orientation to swim to the surface, and then you still didn't know how deep down you were and how far of a swim you had in order to break the surface. And this really could panic some people. And it panicked Sergeant W again. He had difficulty getting out of the helo-dunker. At this point, the safety diver had to take him out. He had mistakenly moved off away from his window and was trying to make a hole in the side of the helo-dunker with his head, where his window definitely was not. And they had to pull him out, take him up to the surface, pump out his lungs, and then put him back in for a retest, which he went through and he did. So that was evolution number 3. And that got you to your final evolution inside of the helo-dunker, your turn in the box, your nightmare in a steel tube, and that was evolution number 4. Evolution number 4 was you had your assigned seat, you walked up the 3 steps onto the metal platform, you entered the helo-dunker, you sat down in your seat, you buckled yourself in, you've got your blacked out goggles on once again, but this time it's everybody out the main door with your blacked out goggles. So how do you get to the main door? How do you know where the main door is in order to get yourself out of this very perilous situation. You take your hand while you're sitting in there as the helo-dunker is going down, filling with water, and you grab something that you know what it is. You get a mental anchor point with your hand prior to the helicopter, the helo-dunker, being sunk into the pool. And that mental anchor point you maintain until the dunker, goes down, rotates, and stops in whatever positions it's going to stop in. Release your seatbelt, still maintaining your mental anchor point. And then if you're in the back of it, then you know you've got 2 seats you have to climb over to get to the door. Or if you're in the front, you know where you're orientated in relation to that main door. And then you slowly, hand by hand, trading mental anchor points, work your way to the door and out the door. But you're doing this at the same time that 5 other guys are doing this who can't see you, can't see any of the other things. And it was pandemonium and chaos. People getting kicked in the head, getting shoved aside, climbed over. You would lose your mental anchor point, and now you're inside of the helo-dunker and you don't know where you are, and you've got to find the main door. And it could get bad, particularly if you were susceptible to fear or claustrophobia, or you started to panic. So when I got this assignment the first time in evolution number 4, I was in the seat 1 back from the main door. And I was going to make the most of it. I knew all I had to do was go over the 1 seat in front of me, hit the main door, and out. So I wrote it down. I waited till it stopped. I popped my seatbelt, went over the first door, pushed my way out, sat there waiting while my body orientated itself in an up-down position, swam to the surface, and made it out no problem. Got to the top of it, and the instructor calls out the failed seat numbers, and he calls mine, and he goes, early release, fail. Early release was that you took your butt out of your seat before the helo-dunker stopped moving. And I knew that I hadn't done it, but my whole military career, through all this military training schools that I've been put through, could be summed up in the strategy: keep your mouth shut, do what you're told, do it to the best of your ability, and don't attract attention. So I didn't say anything, and I went around for my retest. And guess who's retesting with me along with a bunch of other guys? Sergeant W. Sergeant W had to be pulled out of the helo-dunker again by the safety diver, had his lungs pumped out for the third time at this point, and he's going back into the helo-dunker. So we're lined up waiting for our seats, and they call out the seat assignments, and I get the golden ticket. I get the seat right next to the door, to the main cabin door going out. So I'm right there. This is an absolute golden ticket. I'm going to make the most of it. So we get in, we take our seats. They pick it up on the cables. They drop it into the pool. It's submerging. It's rotating, going down. You can't see a thing. It goes down. The helo-dunker stops, and I don't get out of my seat. I pop my seatbelt, and I hold my hands with my butt clamped down to the seat for a 5 count. People are climbing over me. They're going over the top of me. I'm not worried about it. I'm not wasting this opportunity. I count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Reach up, grab the sides of the door, thrust myself out, push off, wait for my body to orientate itself up and down, and swim up until I break the surface. Get out, go up there. I'm golden. They call out the field numbers. They call my number and say early release. And at this point, I look at the instructor and I go, "Sir, what do you mean?" And he looks over at me, looks me right in the eyes, and he goes, "You popped your seatbelt early again, recruit." And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Yes, your butt had to stay in your seat until the helo-dunker stopped moving, but you weren't allowed to release your seatbelt either. And I had misunderstood what early release was, and I had to retest again. And it was a final retest. If you failed this retest, then you were failed out of Naval Aircrewman Candidate School, and in Navy parlance, you were haze gray and underway. So there are 6 of us who have to go back and retest. And one of them, of course, is Sergeant. Once again, had to have his lungs pumped out. Sergeant is standing right in front of me in the line to go up the steps to the platform and load into the helo-dunker. They call out the seat assignments, and I have the worst seat assignment possible. I'm at the back of the bus. I'm the one that's going to be the hardest to make it out of. Sergeant is standing in front of me, and he has been so physically and mentally fatigued to this point that he's shaking violently. But Sergeant never complained. He never once uttered one single word of complaint. He was a Marine and he was a tough cookie, and he never once complained. And they go, all right, up onto the platform and load up. So we're going up the platform, the 3 metal steps, and Sergeant is so weak and trembling so violently that he can't lift his legs up onto the steps. There's a metal railing there, and he reaches over and he grabs the metal railing with one hand. He reaches down with his other hand, and he picks his legs up with his hands to get them up onto the steps. And he slowly works his way, doing that in order to get up onto the platform and get back into the helo-dunker. And I'm walking right behind him. So we get up and we're getting ready to line up and go in and take our seat positions when a voice comes over the loudspeaker, and it's the control room from the guys operating the crane that takes the helo-dunker out on the cables and drops it. And they go, recruits, we've got a malfunction in one of the cables. Stand down. We're shutting down the helo-dunker for the day. Congratulations, you've all passed. And to this day, I truly believe that there was nothing wrong with the helo-dunker. I don't think any of the cables had malfunctioned. I think they knew that they were going to have to fail Sergeant. He went back into the helo-dunker, and instead of seeing a good Marine get failed out of Naval Aircrewman Candidate School, they said that the machine was broke. I truly, in the core of my heart, truly believe that that was the case. So the dead men walking got a reprieve. We got out, we all passed the helo-dunker, and that was my turn, my evolution, and my story with the device straight out of HE double hockey sticks. That evening, a couple buddies of mine who had been with me from boot camp, we were in the exact same training pipeline. We didn't know each other prior to joining the Navy, and we were in the same boot camp and through every single training school, including Naval Aircrewman Candidate School. And we all went out, of course, to the enlisted club, the E-Club as it was known, in order to go get a few beers that evening after having experienced that. And we walked into the E-Club, and Sergeant, I'm going to have to edit that out, Sergeant W is already there. He's sat up at the bar. He's got a seat at the bar, and he had at least 8 shots of whiskey stacked up in front of him, and he downed at least 4 of them and was going on number 5. And good for him. He was a good guy. But that is my Veterans Day story. If you've got a great Veterans Day story, tell it to me in as succinct a manner as possible as you can down in the comments section. And if you're a vet, then thank you for your service. I sincerely appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to wrap this one up and say take care, be safe, and I'll catch you guys next time.